Parents made my childhood the worst moment in my life. And when I grew up, they came to me and wanted me to give them everything. Hey everyone, I'm not sure where to begin, but I really need to get this off my chest. Growing up, I never felt like I mattered much. My parents were always too busy with their own lives to pay much attention to me. Dad was constantly working late, and Mom was more interested in her social life than spending time with me. From an early age, I learned to fend for myself, but the lack of love and attention really took its toll. In elementary school, things weren't any better. I was that weird kid who wore hand-me-downs and always had lunch money, but no lunch packed by a loving parent. Teachers didn't seem to notice me, and classmates found it easy to pick on me. One of the earliest memories I have is of a kid named Jake pushing me into a puddle during recess. Everyone laughed while I stood there, soaked and humiliated. No one ever stood up for me, and I learned to expect that. Middle school was a nightmare. By then, the kids were more ruthless. I remember one day in 7th grade when I was cornered in the bathroom by a group of bullies led by this kid named Eric. They demanded my lunch money, and when I hesitated, they shoved me into a stall and dunked my head in the toilet. I can still recall the smell and the cold water as they laughed and called me names. I tried to tell a teacher, but she just brushed it off, saying, "Boys will be boys." High school wasn't any kinder. I thought things might get better, but they didn't. I was still the target of relentless bullying. My parents remained oblivious, wrapped up in their own worlds. I remember begging my mom to move schools after a particularly brutal day when some seniors dumped a tray of food over my head in the cafeteria. She just told me to toughen up and deal with it. That night, I cried myself to sleep, feeling more alone than ever. As graduation approached, I knew I had to get away. I applied to several universities, making sure to choose ones as far from home as possible. When I got accepted to a university on the opposite coast, I was both excited and terrified. It was my chance to start fresh, but I couldn't shake the fear that things wouldn't change. Moving to a new state for college was a big step for me. It was exciting to think about starting over, but deep down, I was still that scared, lonely kid. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of orientations and new faces. My roommate, Adam, seemed nice enough, but we weren't exactly friends. He was into sports and partying, and I was more reserved, focused on my studies. It didn't take long for the bullying to start again. College was supposed to be different, but it turned out to be more of the same. During my first semester, I tried joining a study group for one of my tougher classes. The group was led by this guy, Scott, who seemed smart and charismatic. However, he quickly singled me out as the weak link. During one of our sessions, he made a snide comment about how I must have cheated to get into the university. Everyone laughed, and I felt that familiar sense of humiliation wash over me. The dorms weren't much better. There was this one guy, Tom, who lived down the hall. He was the stereotypical college jock, always throwing parties and being the center of attention. One night I was trying to study for an important exam when the noise from his party became unbearable. I went over to ask them to keep it down, and Tom laughed in my face before shoving me out of his room. A few minutes later, someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, they doused me with beer. I spent the rest of the night cleaning up and trying to ignore the laughter from the hallway. My classes, which I had hoped would be a refuge, were also a source of stress. There was this one professor, Dr. Mitchell, who seemed to have it out for me. No matter how hard I worked, my papers always came back with harsh critiques and low grades. I once stayed up all night working on a paper, only to receive a D with a note saying my arguments were weak and poorly structured. It felt like I couldn't catch a break anywhere. The constant bullying and academic pressure began to take a toll on my mental health. I started having trouble sleeping and developed anxiety about going to classes or even leaving my room. I tried talking to the campus counselor, but the sessions didn't help much. It felt like no one truly understood what I was going through. By my second semester, I was in a pretty dark place. The bullying had escalated and my grades were slipping. One night, after another humiliating encounter with Tom and his friends, I hit my breaking point. I was walking back to my dorm when I heard them behind me, laughing and making crude comments. I tried to ignore them, but then someone threw a rock, hitting me on the back of the head. I stumbled and fell, scraping my hands and knees on the pavement. They stood there laughing as I picked myself up and walked away, tears streaming down my face. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat in my room, staring at the walls, feeling utterly hopeless. I thought about calling my parents, but I knew they wouldn't understand or care. They had never been there for me, and I didn't expect them to start now. I felt completely alone, with no one to turn to. In a moment of desperation, I posted on a university forum asking for help. I poured my heart out, detailing the bullying and how I felt like I couldn't go on. I didn't expect much, but the response was overwhelming. Dozens of students reached out, sharing their own experiences and offering support. Some even offered to accompany me to class or hang out to keep me company. One message stood out. It was from a girl named Emma, who lived in my dorm. She told me she had noticed what I was going through and wanted to help. We met up for coffee, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like someone actually cared. Emma became a lifeline for me. She introduced me to her friends who welcomed me into their group. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. With Emma's support, things started to improve. I found the courage to report the bullying to the university administration, and they took action against Tom and his friends. They were put on probation, and the parties and harassment stopped. Dr. Mitchell, surprisingly, turned out to be more understanding than I expected. When I explained what I had been going through, he offered extra help and resources to improve my grades. Emma and I grew closer, and she became my best friend. We spent a lot of time together, studying, exploring the campus, and just hanging out. She was always there to listen and offer a shoulder to cry on when things got tough. With her help, I began to rebuild my self-esteem and confidence. As the semesters went by, I started to find my place in the university. I joined a couple of clubs, made new friends, and even started doing better academically. The scars from my past were still there, but they didn't define me anymore. I learned to stand up for myself and seek help when I needed it. Looking back, I can see how far I've come. The journey was incredibly tough, and there were times when I didn't think I would make it. But with the support of people like Emma, I found the strength to keep going. I'm still healing, and I know there will be challenges ahead, but for the first time in my life, I feel hopeful about the future. So, if anyone out there is going through something similar, please know that you're not alone. There are people who care and want to help. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask for support. It can make all the difference. Graduating from university was a monumental achievement for me. I walked across that stage, diploma in hand, feeling a sense of accomplishment and relief. My parents were there, but their presence felt more obligatory than supportive. Nevertheless, I didn't let their indifference overshadow my triumph. This was my moment, and I was proud of myself. Post-graduation life came with its own set of challenges. Finding a job in my field wasn't easy, and I faced several rejections. Each one felt like a step back, reminding me of all the times I had been made to feel worthless. But Emma's constant encouragement kept me going. She believed in me even when I doubted myself. Eventually, I landed a position at a marketing firm. It wasn't my dream job, but it was a start. The office environment was competitive, and I often felt like the odd one out. My colleagues were friendly enough, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they saw me as an easy target. There were subtle jabs and exclusion from social events, but I had learned how to cope better. I focused on my work and kept a professional distance. Emma and I stayed close, and her support continued to be my anchor. She had graduated with honors and was pursuing a master's degree. We often talked about the future, and those conversations kept me grounded. She encouraged me to seek therapy to address the lingering trauma from my past, and I finally decided to give it a try. Therapy was a revelation. For the first time, I had a safe space to unpack my experiences and understand how they shaped me. My therapist helped me develop coping mechanisms and strategies to build healthier relationships. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but with each session, I felt a little more in control of my life. One day during a routine team meeting at work, an unexpected opportunity arose. The company was launching a new campaign and needed a project lead. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready, but Emma's voice echoed in my mind, urging me to take the leap. I volunteered, and to my surprise, my manager agreed. Leading the project was one of the most challenging and rewarding experiences of my career. I faced setbacks and criticism, but I also learned to trust my abilities and advocate for my ideas. The campaign was a success, and for the first time, I felt a sense of professional validation. My colleagues began to see me in a different light, and I started to feel like I belonged. With my newfound confidence, I began to take more risks, both professionally and personally. I started networking more, attending industry events, and building connections. I even reconnected with my parents, attempting to mend our strained relationship. It wasn't easy, and there were many awkward and painful conversations, but I felt it was a necessary step in my healing process. Emma and I continued to be each other's support system. Our friendship deepened, and I realized how much she meant to me. One evening, as we were sitting on her balcony watching the sunset, I mustered the courage to tell her how I felt. To my relief and joy, she felt the same way. Our relationship blossomed into something beautiful, built on a foundation of trust, respect, and love. As I reflect on my journey, I am grateful for the hardships I endured. They shaped me into a resilient, empathetic, and determined person. I learned the importance of self-worth, the power of seeking help, and the strength that comes from vulnerability. To anyone out there feeling lost or alone, know that there is hope. Surround yourself with people who uplift you, seek help when you need it, and never stop believing in your ability to overcome. Life will always have its ups and downs, but with the right support and mindset, you can rise above the challenges and find your path to happiness. Thank you for reading my story. Writing this has been cathartic, and I hope it resonates with others who have faced similar struggles. Remember, you are not alone, and there is always a way forward. Hey, everyone. I wanted to share an update on my journey since my last post. After graduating and starting my job at the marketing firm, things were tough, but I managed to push through with Emma's support. One of the best decisions I made was to seek professional help for my mental health. Emma helped me find a highly recommended psychotherapist named Dr. Laura Evans. Dr. Evans' office was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold, clinical spaces I had imagined. On our first session, I was nervous, but she immediately put me at ease with her empathetic demeanor. She asked about my childhood, my experiences at school, and my struggles at university. For the first time, I felt like someone truly understood the depth of my pain and wanted to help me heal. Over the next 9 months, therapy became a cornerstone of my recovery. Dr. Evans and I worked through my trauma, unraveling the layers of neglect, bullying, and self-doubt that had plagued me for so long. She taught me coping mechanisms, helped me reframe my negative thoughts, and encouraged me to set boundaries with my parents. I started to see a glimmer of hope, and slowly, I began to reclaim my life. As my mental health improved, so did my performance at work. I was more focused, confident, and driven. I started taking on more challenging projects, and my efforts didn't go unnoticed. My manager, Mr. Johnson, recognized my potential and began mentoring me. He taught me the ins and outs of the business, and I soaked up every bit of knowledge. Within a year, I received my first promotion. I was now a team leader, responsible for overseeing a small group of junior marketers. The sense of accomplishment was exhilarating, and it fueled my ambition even further. I set my sights on higher goals, determined to climb the corporate ladder. Meanwhile, I joined a gym to improve my physical health. The gym became another sanctuary for me, a place where I could channel my energy and stress. I met a group of like-minded individuals who shared my passion for fitness. Among them was Luke, a former college athlete turned personal trainer. Luke and I quickly became friends, and he pushed me to achieve new heights in my fitness journey. Through Luke, I met several influential people who frequented the gym. These connections opened doors to networking events and social circles I never imagined I'd be part of. I found myself rubbing shoulders with executives, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders. My confidence soared, and I started to envision a future filled with endless possibilities. Despite my personal and professional growth, my relationship with my parents remained strained. My attempts to mend our relationship were met with indifference. They were still wrapped up in their own lives, seemingly oblivious to the positive changes I was making. I decided to focus on myself and the people who truly supported me. 7 years into my career, I achieved a milestone that seemed like a distant dream. When I first started, I became a partner at the firm. The journey to this point was filled with hard work, perseverance, and a lot of late nights. My promotion was celebrated with a lavish party thrown by Mr. Johnson, who had become not just a mentor but a close friend. During the celebration, I had a moment to reflect on how far I had come. The kid who was once bullied and neglected had grown into a successful, confident professional. It felt surreal, and I was immensely proud of myself. My personal life flourished alongside my career. Emma and I remained inseparable, and our relationship grew stronger each day. We moved in together and started talking about our future. I proposed to her during a weekend getaway, and she said yes. Our wedding was a beautiful, intimate ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. Life was good, but it wasn't without its shocking moments. One such event happened at work. A colleague, James, whom I had always considered a friend, was caught embezzling company funds. The revelation was a huge scandal that rocked the firm. James had been manipulating accounts and siphoning money for years. His arrest was a sobering reminder of the darker sides of the corporate world. It also reinforced the importance of integrity and trust in my professional relationships. Another surprising development came from my estranged cousin, Andrew. We hadn't spoken in years, but out of the blue, he reached out to me. Andrew had fallen on hard times, struggling with addiction and financial instability. He asked for my help, and despite our history, I felt compelled to support him. I helped him find a rehabilitation program and provided financial assistance. Seeing him turn his life around was a rewarding experience, and it brought us closer together. Hey everyone, it's been a while since my last update. Life was going great, my career was thriving, my relationship with Emma was stronger than ever, and I was in the best shape of my life. But just when I thought I had left my troubled past behind, an unexpected bombshell dropped. One afternoon, as I was wrapping up a meeting at work, I received a call from my parents. We hadn't been close, and our interactions were always strained, so I was surprised to hear from them. My father's voice was cold and businesslike as he said, "We need to talk. It's urgent." Reluctantly, I agreed to meet them at a local coffee shop. When I arrived, they were already seated, looking unusually serious. My mother slid a document across the table toward me. Confused, I picked it up and began to read. My heart sank as I realized what it was they were demanding $150,000 from me for what they called good treatment during my childhood. According to them, all the years of providing for me entitled them to a significant financial payback now that I was successful. I was stunned. This felt like a slap in the face, especially given how neglected I had felt throughout my childhood. I refused to give in to their demands, which only made them angrier. They threatened to sue me for inequality, claiming that I owed them for the investment they made in raising me. True to their word, a few weeks later I was served with legal papers. My parents were suing me for $1 million, citing inequality and emotional distress. The case gained media attention, and I felt my world starting to crumble. How could my own parents do this to me? I hired a top-notch lawyer, Megan Bennett, to defend me. Megan was known for her tenacity and expertise in family law. She assured me that we had a strong case and that we would fight this injustice together. The court proceedings began with both sides presenting their opening statements. My parents' lawyer, Mr. Carter, painted a picture of them as loving, devoted parents who had sacrificed everything for me. He argued that my success was a direct result of their efforts and that it was only fair for them to be compensated. Megan, on the other hand, focused on my neglected upbringing. She presented evidence of the emotional and psychological abuse I endured, including testimonies from former teachers and friends who witnessed the neglect. She argued that my parents were trying to exploit my success out of greed and that their claims were baseless. The trial was grueling, lasting several weeks. Each day, I sat in the courtroom, reliving painful memories as both sides presented their arguments. My parents testified about the financial hardships they faced while raising me, emphasizing how they provided for my education and basic needs. Their testimonies were filled with dramatic anecdotes designed to elicit sympathy from the jury. Megan countered by calling witnesses who testified about the lack of emotional support and attention I received. She brought up the bullying I endured at school and the impact it had on my mental health. She also presented evidence of my parents' extravagant lifestyle, which contradicted their claims of financial sacrifice. One of the most shocking moments came when Megan revealed financial records showing that my parents had spent large sums of money on luxury vacations and high-end goods while I was growing up. This evidence cast serious doubt on their claims of financial hardship and sacrifice. Mr. Carter tried to discredit me by bringing up my struggles with bullying and mental health, suggesting that I was exaggerating my experiences for sympathy. He even called a former high school classmate, Eric, to testify against me. Eric downplayed the bullying, claiming it was just harmless teasing. However, Megan quickly dismantled his credibility by presenting social media posts where Eric bragged about his bullying antics. As the trial came to a close, both sides presented their final arguments. Mr. Carter appealed to the jury's sense of familial duty, arguing that my parents were entitled to compensation for their years of sacrifice. Megan, however, urged the jury to see through the facade and recognize the exploitation at play. She highlighted the evidence of neglect and the emotional trauma I had endured, painting a stark contrast to the loving parents my parents claimed to be. After several hours of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. My heart pounded as we all stood in the courtroom, awaiting the decision. The jury foreman read the verdict we find in favor of the defendant, dismissing all claims made by the plaintiffs. Relief washed over me as I realized that justice had prevailed. The court recognized the truth of my experiences and saw through my parents' deceit. My parents were ordered to pay my legal fees, and the case was dismissed with prejudice, meaning they could not bring the same claims against me again. The trial was a turning point in my life. It was painful and stressful, but it also reaffirmed my belief in standing up for myself and seeking justice. My relationship with my parents was irreparably damaged, and we have not spoken since the trial ended. It's a painful reality, but one I've come to accept. The media attention from the trial brought unexpected consequences. Some people reached out with support, sharing their own stories of family betrayal. Others criticized me, unable to understand the full context of my experiences. But through it all, I remained focused on moving forward. Emma was my rock throughout the ordeal. Her unwavering support and love helped me stay strong. We decided to take a long vacation to recharge and escape the chaos. During this time, I reflected on everything that had happened and reaffirmed my commitment to building a positive, fulfilling life. Back at work, I poured myself into my projects, driven by a renewed sense of purpose. My colleagues were incredibly supportive, and the firm continued to thrive. My friendship with Luke deepened, and he introduced me to new opportunities within the fitness community, including a partnership in a new gym venture. Thank you for reading my story. Sharing this has been therapeutic, and I hope it resonates with others who may be facing similar struggles. Remember, you have the strength to overcome any challenge, and there are always people out there who will stand by your side. Hey everyone, I wanted to share an update about a recent event that turned my world upside down. Just when I thought I had finally reached a point of stability, life threw another curveball my way. This time, it involved Richard, a mentor and close ally who had played a significant role in my career advancement. Richard and I had met at the gym where Luke and I frequently worked out. He was a charismatic and influential figure in the business world, known for his strategic acumen and extensive network. Over time, Richard took me under his wing, providing valuable advice and introducing me to key players in the industry. His mentorship had been instrumental in my rapid career growth, and I considered him not just a mentor but a friend. Everything changed when news broke that Richard was implicated in a massive corporate fraud scandal. The media was in a frenzy, and the details were shocking. Richard was accused of orchestrating a scheme that involved embezzling millions of dollars from several companies, including our firm. The allegations were serious, and the repercussions were immediate. It all started with a whistleblower's anonymous tip. The whistleblower, an employee at one of the companies Richard had dealings with, provided detailed documents that outlined suspicious financial transactions. These documents were handed over to federal investigators, who launched a thorough investigation into Richard's activities. The investigation revealed a complex web of deceit. Richard had set up shell companies to funnel money from legitimate businesses. He used his charm and influence to gain the trust of CEOs and financial officers, convincing them to invest in bogus projects. Once the money was transferred, it would disappear into the accounts of the shell companies, which Richard controlled. The scale of the fraud was staggering. Over the years, Richard had embezzled close to $50 million. The money was used to finance a lavish lifestyle that included luxury cars, expensive properties, and extravagant vacations. The revelation of his double life shocked everyone who knew him, including me. The news hit like a bombshell. Being closely associated with Richard, my integrity was immediately called into question. The media swarmed, eager to uncover any connection between us. My phone was constantly ringing with calls from reporters, and my email inbox was flooded with inquiries. It was a nightmare. My firm took swift action to distance itself from Richard. An emergency meeting was called, and I was asked to explain my relationship with him. I cooperated fully, providing all the information I had and agreeing to an internal review of my activities to ensure there were no improprieties on my part. The internal review was a stressful period. Every aspect of my professional life was scrutinized, from my financial records to my email correspondence. I had nothing to hide, but the process was invasive and exhausting. My colleagues, initially supportive, began to keep their distance, wary of any association with the scandal. The federal investigation into Richard's activities was thorough and relentless. Evidence mounted against him, and it became clear that his fraudulent schemes had far-reaching consequences. Companies he had defrauded were facing financial ruin, and hundreds of employees were at risk of losing their jobs. Richard was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The trial was highly publicized, drawing attention from media outlets across the country. Every day, new details emerged about the extent of Richard's deceit and the impact of his actions on innocent people. As a key figure in Richard's professional circle, I was called to testify. Standing in the courtroom, I felt a mix of anger and betrayal. Richard, who had once been a mentor and friend, had deceived me and countless others. During my testimony, I recounted our interactions and provided insights into his manipulative tactics. It was a difficult experience, but I was determined to see justice served. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury found Richard guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, a harsh but deserved punishment for the lives he had destroyed. The companies he defrauded received some restitution through the liquidation of his assets, but the damage was done. The scandal had a lasting impact on me. Although I was exonerated of any wrongdoing, the experience left me wary and cautious. My reputation took a hit, and it took time to rebuild the trust I had worked so hard to establish. However, the ordeal also reinforced my commitment to integrity and transparency in my professional life. With the scandal behind me, I focused on rebuilding my career and regaining the trust of my colleagues and clients. The firm's leadership recognized my dedication and resilience, and within a year, I was promoted to senior partner. The promotion was a testament to my hard work and a step towards restoring my professional standing. Emma and I continued to find solace in each other. Her unwavering support during the scandal was a pillar of strength for me. We made a conscious effort to put the past behind us and focus on building a positive future. We also continued our involvement in the community, using our experiences to mentor others facing similar challenges. Life after the scandal was a mix of relief and caution. I had learned valuable lessons about trust and the importance of vigilance. While the journey had been fraught with challenges, it also revealed the strength of my character and the support of those who truly cared about me. Despite the resolution of the scandal, life continued to present new challenges. One evening, Emma and I received a call that would test our resilience once again. Andrew, my cousin who had turned his life around, was involved in a serious car accident. He was in critical condition, and we rushed to the hospital to be by his side. Seeing Andrew in the hospital bed, hooked up to machines, was a heart-wrenching sight. The doctors were uncertain about his chances of recovery, and the next few days were a blur of anxiety and prayers. Emma and I took turns keeping vigil at his bedside, hoping for a miracle. Miraculously, Andrew pulled through. His recovery was slow and arduous, but his determination was inspiring. Throughout his rehabilitation, Emma and I provided support, helping him navigate the physical and emotional challenges. His recovery brought us even closer, and our bond grew stronger. 9 months after the trial, life had settled into a relatively peaceful routine. One late night, I returned home from the office, exhausted but content. As I parked the car and stepped out, I heard someone call my name. Turning around, I saw Hannah, my sister, running towards me. We hadn't spoken since the trial, and her presence was both surprising and alarming. Hannah looked frantic, and I noticed she was holding something metallic in her hand. Before I could react, she was upon me, screaming about how I had ruined her life and our parents. The metal object turned out to be an iron rod, and she swung it with a fury I had never seen before. The first blow hit my arm, and I felt a sickening crack as the bone broke. Pain exploded through my body, but there was no time to process it. Hannah was relentless, striking me repeatedly. I tried to shield myself, but she was too fast. The rod connected with my head, and I felt a warm rush of blood as everything went hazy. Through the pain and confusion, I heard her screaming, "You're a crook! You ruined everything!" she yelled, each word punctuated by another blow. I managed to roll away, but she kicked me hard in the ribs, knocking the wind out of me. I was on the ground, struggling to breathe as she raised the rod for another strike. Just then, a neighbor who had heard the commotion ran out, shouting for her to stop. Hannah hesitated, the rage in her eyes giving way to panic. She dropped the rod and fled into the night, leaving me battered and bleeding on the ground. The neighbor called an ambulance, and I was rushed to the hospital. The doctors worked quickly to treat my injuries, which included a broken arm, multiple fractures, and a severe concussion. I spent weeks in the hospital, undergoing surgeries and intensive care. The physical pain was excruciating, but the emotional trauma was even harder to bear. Emma was by my side throughout my recovery, her presence a constant source of comfort. The police arrested Hannah the following day, charging her with assault with a deadly weapon and attempted murder. The trial was swift, and with the overwhelming evidence and witness testimonies, she was found guilty and sentenced to several years in prison. The attack left me physically and emotionally scarred. Recovery was slow, and I had to take time off work to heal. Therapy sessions with Dr. Evans became even more crucial as I worked through the trauma of the attack. Emma and I also continued our couples therapy, ensuring our relationship remained strong amidst the turmoil. Despite the setbacks, I refused to let the attack define me. I focused on rebuilding my life, both personally and professionally. The support from Emma, Andrew, and my friends was invaluable, helping me navigate the difficult journey of recovery. 9 months later, I returned to work, more determined than ever to succeed. My firm stood by me, recognizing my resilience and dedication. I continued to thrive in my career, taking on new challenges and achieving new milestones. Hey everyone, I wanted to share an update on what happened after the trial. Emma and I decided to take a well-deserved vacation to recharge and escape the chaos that had consumed our lives. We chose a picturesque ski resort in Aspen, Colorado. It was the perfect getaway, offering a serene escape with breathtaking mountain views and the thrill of skiing. We arrived at the resort just as the first snow of the season blanketed the landscape. The air was crisp and the atmosphere was festive with holiday decorations adorning the lodge. Our room had a cozy fireplace and a balcony that overlooked the snowy slopes. It was a winter wonderland, and we were eager to make the most of our time there. Our days were filled with skiing, snowboarding, and exploring the charming village nearby. We indulged in hot cocoa at quaint cafes, enjoyed romantic dinners by the fire, and spent our evenings relaxing in the resort's hot tub. It was the perfect escape, and for the first time in months, I felt truly at peace. One afternoon, as Emma and I were returning from the slopes, we decided to stop by a local bar for a drink. The bar was rustic and cozy, filled with other vacationers and the hum of laughter and conversation. We found a quiet corner and ordered our drinks, enjoying the warm ambiance. As we sipped our drinks, I noticed a familiar face at the bar. My heart skipped a beat when I realized it was Richard, a former colleague who had been caught embezzling company funds. He had been arrested and sentenced to prison, and I hadn't thought about him since. But here he was, looking disheveled and out of place. Richard spotted us and quickly made his way over. His eyes darted nervously around the room, and he seemed desperate. He asked if we could talk, and reluctantly we agreed and followed him to a more secluded area of the bar. Richard wasted no time getting to the point. He had escaped from prison and needed money to leave the country. He begged us for help, pleading that he couldn't go back to prison and that he had changed. Richard's plea caught us off guard. The idea of helping a fugitive was alarming, and we were unsure how to respond. He looked genuinely desperate, but we knew we couldn't just hand over money to someone who had broken the law. Despite our sympathy for Richard's plight, we couldn't ignore the fact that he was a fugitive. We had worked hard to build a life of integrity and success, and aiding him would jeopardize everything we had achieved. We told Richard that we couldn't help him break the law, but offered to help him find legal assistance, hoping there might be another way to resolve his situation. Richard looked defeated, his shoulders slumping. He muttered that he knew it was a long shot, and walked away, disappearing into the night. Emma and I sat in silence, processing what had just happened. We felt a mixture of guilt and guilt for not helping Richard in the way he wanted, and relief for not compromising our principles. The encounter with Richard left us shaken. We spent the rest of the evening discussing what had happened and the implications of our decision. We knew we had done the right thing, but it was still hard to shake the image of Richard's desperate face from our minds. The next morning, we received a call from the local authorities. They had been tipped off about Richard's presence at the resort and wanted to speak with us. We explained the situation and provided as much information as we could. The officers assured us that we had done the right thing by not aiding Richard and that they would handle the situation from here. Later that day, we saw news reports that Richard had been apprehended near the resort. He had been trying to hitch a ride out of town when he was recognized and reported. The news brought a sense of closure, but also a reminder of the complexities of human nature and the difficult choices we sometimes have to make. As our vacation came to an end, Emma and I reflected on everything that had happened: the trial, the encounter with Richard, and the peaceful moments we had shared at the resort. We realized that life would always have its challenges, but it was how we faced them that defined us.